in the past, I only wanted to use a text that I had, read 50 times and was aware of everything that anyone could possibly say about it. But with these types of tools and some of the discussions that we've had, it's not about the text, right? It's about the critical thinking skills students gain through the process of going through the text. So I'm teaching a brand new course that I've never taught before. I put books on there that I had read maybe the week before, and just through these kinds of things, I just wanted to hear what they said about it. Why just fill in them on the knowledge that I've had after reading, 5 or 6 times and reading all these academic papers on it? Why don't I let them do that and then come back with what they found? And I learned a lot in the process, and I think they're a lot more engaged at the same time.
Has anybody else felt that their stance has shifted in the classroom?
There's definitely a release of that responsibility, like Colleen said. I'm not the bearer of all knowledge, and I'm not even necessarily the framer of how your presentation is going to go. Mm-hmm. I don't give a lot of guidelines in that way anymore, but I do set up expectations for them to think for themselves, come up with those questions that they need to ask, and then guide that part of the process. And I think it's kind of ironic that because it's such, the tools that we use are so robust, eventually they kind of disappear, and what is front and center is that process, that learning. So it's not like today we're going to do the ladder of inference. Today we're going to understand perspective. We're going to understand how people draw conclusions and make assessments and judgments about each other in the world around them.
I had one other discussion with a teacher recently, and she said, "Why would you want to answer someone else's questions?" And when she said that, it was a huge light bulb went off for me. That's true. Why are they answering the questions that I find interesting about this text? And since I've let that go, some of the questions I've heard are way better than anything that I've come up with on my own.
Integrative thinking and Rotman has philosophically shifted me. I think I've talked to you guys about this before, but I think about these students who are in front of me are students who are selected to be in my class because they all think differently. And it's only together that this magical group of students is going to come up with the ideas of the course. Where for sure, I used to plot the course and I knew what I wanted them to know. I looked at the curriculum, I decided how it would look in the class, and then I set them up to be successful within my box. Mm-hmm. And now it's such a different way to look at education, where I'm like, we have a think tank and we have problems to solve, and I can connect them to the curriculum, and I wonder how they're going to be solved this semester.
It's funny, I never really kind of thought about it, the way you just framed it in terms when you said, why would you want to answer someone else's question? Because for me, that's what science is all about, right? And, what I've been trying to do is I've been trying to actually help students to do less canned science, in the sense that they are, they're going through a recipe that I give them in a handout and answering questions that I ask them to answer to make conclusions. What I'm doing is I'm actually giving them the opportunity to ask the question themselves, help them to do the problem solving that they need to actually answer the question, and then be able to connect it all together to actually answer their own questions. And sometimes it's easy to answer questions, but when you get into questions that are really deep, being able to being a student and being able to kind of actually understand how to get deep in terms of what you're going to give me is really hard. What I've been doing in the science curriculum, in the science classroom, is I'm trying to actually develop the ability of students to ask questions and then answer them, mm-hmm. right? And these strategies that we're talking about, really what they're doing is they're, in a sense, they help us to frame the process that students can go through to actually be able to come up with that really kind of deep thinking. If you read a scientific article in a scientific journal like Nature, if you read the discussion, the scientists that are actually writing that discussion, they come up with so many different conclusions with so much depth, which is supported by the results. And the thing is that we as science teachers, or we as teachers in general, need to be able to get to the point where our students can do that. And for me, that's what this these strategies do, right? It's big for me that way.
For them to go deep like that, there's a degree, they need to have that level of confidence, and they almost have to, through what we're doing in the classroom, get the permission to speak up. I think this is where it connects to student voice, is the fact that, when we're doing, as Colleen said, say a short story that I use, a short story I've never read before, or I've only read once, I haven't thought a lot about yet, where you introduce that to the students, you say, let's talk about this issue, but not where I'm the expert on the issue, where I've read this short story dozens of times and I've gone over it with a fine-tooth comb, but instead to say, I'm not sure what this means, what do you think? And I take myself out of the center of the classroom and put it on them to say, what do you think? And it gives them permission to take a shot at it, and to sort of suggest, it takes away this idea that, well, there's that one right answer that the teachers come up with and we've got to try to get there somehow. Instead, it's more about, as Colleen said earlier, demonstrating their thinking.